Welcome, everyone. My name is John Hagen. I'm the Executive Director of the United States Electronic Thesis and Dissertation Association, and I'm delighted to welcome everyone to our workshop and to the USETDA and ETD 2025 Symposium. We have a full agenda for the workshop, so I'm going to jump right in just with the overview of our agenda, and then we'll start with our little speaker segments here. So as a side note, in terms of the ETDs for beginners title, that can be somewhat of a misnomer. It's not only for beginners, but certainly even for veterans who want to brush up on the latest things that have been happening, and just get a good general overview of the landscape and what's happening in ETD world. So without further ado, I'll jump right in. So I'll introduce our workshop team. Certainly I'll be our organizer and moderator for today, timekeeper and all that. So we have our panelists who I'm going to introduce individually with the next slide. So Dr. Edward Fox from NDLTD, the executive director. Ed will talk a bit about the history of the ETD movement and all things ETD. I'll talk a bit about ETD implementation, kind of general overview of a lot of different issues that one has to consider when implementing ETD programs and so forth. And then we'll touch base on some of these topics and do a deep dive with other speakers. We'll hear from Austin McLean from ProQuest, and he'll talk about their ETD administrator system, and I'll talk a bit about open source ingesting systems and so forth, and repository systems. We'll hear from Dr. Fox again about preservation strategies, absolutely vital for ETD programs. We'll hear from Thomas Dowling, talking about the ETD metadata, the union catalog, the ETD search portal, and those kind of interesting facets that we often don't think about, but are very vital to the ecosphere of ETDs. We'll hear from our colleagues Kristin Terrill and Ruth and Sally Evans to talk a little bit about our community engagement group, our ETD formatting users group, and I'll talk a little bit about regional networking and so forth and how that has evolved in the United States. We'll hear again from Dr. Fox about the Journal of Electronic Theses and Dissertations. And we'll just have a final wrap up toward the end of the session here. So I also wanted to bring to your attention, those of you who are newbies or people who would like to brush up on terminology. We have a sort of ETD thesaurus on the US ETD website, and so we'd encourage you, if your terminology you're not familiar with, to visit that site. And if you find terminology that's not there, let us know, and we'll be happy to update that. So that was all I had. I'm going to stop sharing here, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Fox and Ed. The floor is yours.
Good morning, and whatever time of day, wherever you are. I serve as Executive Director for the Network Digital Library of Theses and Dissertations, and I'm happy on behalf of that organization, which is co-sponsoring this conference, to give a little bit of background for what's going on. I should mention that this session, as well as the conference, is being recorded, so we can have a record of what's going on. And if you look at the bottom of the slide, all of the talks I'm giving at the conference are on my website, and there's a link there, and you'll be able to get to that too if you'd like, just going to my homepage. So what's this all about? NDLTD has served as an advocate for training authors, i.e. graduate students, expanding access to knowledge, preserving that knowledge, broadly improving graduate education, as well as sometimes we have theses from bachelor's programs earlier on that, broadly enhancing scholarly communication and empowering students and universities all around the world. So NDLTD has been leading this worldwide electronic thesis and dissertation initiative. Our mission as an international organization is through leadership and innovation to promote adoption, creation, dissemination, use, preservation, all the different life cycle aspects of ETDs. And we encourage the efforts of all institutions of higher education, libraries, and other kind of groups to use the best electronic publishing and digital library techniques, which include repositories and other things, to provide open access to scholarship all around the world, to share knowledge more effectively, and thus to unlock the many potential benefits around the world. So there are two sort of broad scenarios that this relates to. One is at the level of the universities. They often previously had paper theses and dissertations in large numbers, which took a lot of space, was very expensive, and so forth. And people rarely referred to those wonderful works. So can we, through this, improve the visibility of the research at the university? This is a benefit for them. So it sort of goes through stages at different institutions. Many begin by allowing and then having a program and then improving graduate education based on all of this, eventually to require ETDs, and then as resources become available to even scan old works, so not just the new works are going to be shared. It's also important for universities to preserve their scholarship, and this is another thing that can be a benefit to universities in many different ways. On the other side, for graduate students, this saves them money relative to many paper copies. Also, it's an opportunity once in their career to learn the best methods to communicate electronically, which should prepare them for future academic or other kind of activities, and to understand those practices and methods, sort of catch them along the way. They have to do this, and so in many places, so they get to learn this, which is a good life skill to have. And to more broadly, in terms of that communication, share other things as are appropriate for their research to be better understood. Data sets, software, videos, other kind of born digital content, which is really the way scholarship is going these days. And this benefits them by giving them greater visibility to the world because more people will see their works instead of very few, maybe thousands or tens of thousands, and thus get more citations and more recognition for their contributions. So NDLTD has a website, ndltd.org. To make it easy for people, you can get to the same place with theses.org and dissertations.org. We reserve those domains. It broadly supports worldwide open access and member services for the world community. And among those are things for university administrators, librarians, faculty, students, and the general public. There are many different topics covered on that website. How to find, create, and preserve ETDs, how to set up a program, legal, technical issues, and news about the ETD community. We're fortunate to have a board of directors from all around the world that is listed here, and you can see many different countries. We have a number of the board members attending this particular session and attending the different conference, so you'll see some of them along the way, which is great. And since I was asked to present a little bit about history, this all began for me in 1987 when this company called UMI, which later turned into eventually ProQuest, Clarivate, decided to run a project and a discussion and a meeting in Ann Arbor, Michigan, to see how we could go electronic with different kinds of books. And a bunch of us attended this, and that's when sort of things got started. It took a while for things to move forward. This was before PDF came along. When that came along, we were among the early groups to see this would be beneficial for people. Ran meetings starting in '92, Coalition for Networked Information, the Council of Graduate School, UMI, Virginia Tech, and we invited 10 universities from North America to participate and sort of explore and see what could happen. In the south of the US, there was an electronic library project that kind of supported this. In '94, we had a workshop at Virginia Tech, which said that ultimately we should have multiple representations of people's research, not just PDF, but also other forms. At that point, it was HTML, perhaps after that, XML, HTML, and multimedia. In '96, we had support from the US Department of Education, its fund for improvement of post-secondary education, to move this not only through the Southeast, which sort of was the regional network for that, but also across the country. By '97, this spread to the UK and Germany and other places. In '98, we had our first symposium. This was in Memphis, and I believe Larry Teague is at the conference this time and will also be able to contribute. He was the host for that particular conference. We had one in my place at Blacksburg, Virginia Tech, Florida, California, Utah. In 2003, we decided to become a little bit more formal and incorporated as an international nonprofit. And that year, we had a conference in Berlin, then back to Kentucky, Australia, Canada, Sweden, Scotland, back to Pennsylvania, Texas, South Africa, Peru, Hong Kong, England. That's up to 2014. You see, we went on to India, France, back to Washington when we had a joint conference with USETDA, which had launched a few years back in 2009. Taiwan, Portugal, UAE. This is when COVID came, so we were sort of in that area for a couple of years. Serbia, last couple of years ago in India, and last year in Zambia. And you can see from our website, there's a page that shows all those different kinds of places. And we're excited to be having this conference as a virtual event. There are many benefits of what NDLTD does. You'll hear later from Thomas Dowling about the Union Catalog and the global search. You'll hear from me later about a journal. As I mentioned, this website has educational information content. We run a mailing list you can join to get the latest news and to share things, have different kind of social media. We have two awards program. You'll hear tomorrow evening of our ETD Leadership Award, but we also have awards for innovative ETDs, people who are doing unusual things. So you can look at that, and we have videos from those awards. I'll mention later about the journal, and we have a number of the editorial board members who are at this particular conference. This is an opportunity for people to share their research, and we'll talk more about that later. There have been many sponsors over the years. You can see a list of different organizations that have put funding into this from many different sources to produce all kinds of interesting resources in multiple languages as well. At Virginia Tech, we've had many people do research on ETDs. So ETDs on ETDs. And you can see a list of some of the students who've worked on building new and better systems that can make this kind of work more accessible and improve access to it. We're happy to have, again, collaboration this year with USETDA. In 2017, this was in Washington, D.C. And I should mention, this is just an exploration. We're considering a possible merger between those two organizations. And I'm happy to take questions, but probably later on. So thank you for your time and interest.
Okay, thank you, Ed.
Back to John.
Oh, thank you. Yes, that went quicker than I realized, which is fine. We have additional time for discussion later on, or even possibly along the way. So I was just getting ready to pull up my slides for the beginners. So bear with me 2 seconds, please. Oops. Implementation, yes. Okay. That's correct. One. Share. There we go. So we're going to talk a lot about program implementation issues and responsibilities. There's a lot to consider when you're thinking about implementing an electronic thesis or dissertation program. Of course, these days, I think most people have already done that, but there are always newcomers to the group, and so we're happy to tell you how my experiences have gone along the way. Again, a reminder about our ET thesaurus, so if you find terminology you're not familiar with, feel free to look up the information. So what are some of our ETD goals? We want students to learn about electronic publishing and digital libraries. Of course, we want to produce timely technology and knowledge and promote knowledge sharing. We want universities to unlock the potential of their intellectual property and products. And certainly we want to improve library services. So some of the considerations when you're setting up an ETD system and program on campus, you have to think about server and software, digital preservation issues, putting together a web information site, resources for your students, and so forth. Putting together an administrative policy and task force or some sort of administrative um, group on campus to come up with regulations and policies. You have to handle public relations. There's oftentimes politics involved. We'll get a little bit into that interesting aspects, but some areas in academics are a little want to hold on to their research a little tighter than others for various publishing reasons. Um, we have to consider intellectual property and copyright. So whether you're talking about patent or copyright for journal articles that are published before the dissertation, all these things you have to think about along the way, and how do you accommodate those issues. You have to provide training and information to your students and your faculty. Certainly, computer lab assistance is appropriate and very helpful for students if they can get hands-on support in your existing computer labs. You want to provide robust technical support, and certainly you need to provide access to the ETDs once you've ingested them, reviewed them, and put them out there for the public. So, um, in my experience, in terms of the impact of the program, it impacted our administration, obviously, our graduate school, the Office of Information Technology, the libraries, the students, and certainly the faculty. So we have to think about all these players, stakeholders, as we often call them, in the process, and various perspectives that are involved with that. Generally, in terms of program policies, it's best to mandate, if you can get your provost to just lay the law down and saying thou shall submit electronic documents, and you will no longer do paper documents. Sometimes that's easier said than done, but top-down approaches often work best to make that happen on campus. Certainly, the experiences I had at West Virginia University are reflected within this presentation, and I suspect that oftentimes maybe many of these hurdles have been resolved, or people just use the models that have been successful, including mandates. And so you see the illustration of the carrot and the stick, the classic sort of situation. So various types of programs that you could implement: a single ETD collection, maybe an entire institutional repository. Hopefully that would be the grander goal. You could put ETDs in there as well as other digital library collections, maybe published works from your faculty and so forth. Some schools have evolved out. We'll talk a little bit later about including internal administrative works and instruments for accreditation and so forth. So lots of possibilities, starting with the simple concept of the ETD collection. So what types of software and systems are there? There are open source repositories. There are certainly commercial repository systems and services, and homegrown solutions. Yours truly has been through all of those scenarios since we started some maybe 30 years ago, 20 years ago, along with Virginia Tech in the early days. Some examples of open source repositories: DuraSpace, for example, the ePrints out of University of Southampton, Fedora Commons, Greenstone digital library software has been around for quite a while. We have an extensive collection of resources available from the USETD website. And if you see new resources that need updating, certainly let us know. That's just a snapshot of things. Some examples of commercial repository systems out there: Content DM, Digital Commons, Digitool, Discovery Garden, DSpace Direct, Open Repository through Biomed Central, Simple Digital Library, and Vital. Now, some of these systems have been absorbed or evolved into other systems, have been bought out, and since this list was produced. But there's now even a longer list of resources and options available, and very, very stable systems. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel anymore. In terms of ETD deposit interfaces, there are, as I mentioned, some standalone systems. Austin McLean, our friends from ProQuest, will talk a little bit about their ETD administrator system and how you can get it set up fairly quickly to collect ETDs, do the review process, and get things in place to get your students graduated in time without having to, again, create a whole campus backbone. repository system on your campus. But it's an easy way to enter into the arena of ETDs. There's the ETD data, ETDDB, which I'm not quite sure if that's even still available, but it had been popular for quite a while, and that came out of the research endeavors of our friends at Virginia Tech and NDLTD. There's the ETD drop through Meta Archives. There's the Open ETD through Rutgers University. And the folks in Texas put together the Vireo system, and they have their whole ingest setup that goes along with that. Some homegrown solutions. So certainly you could have an individual department or institution, possibly a regional consortium. Some examples would be Ohio linked at a statewide system, Texas with their Vireo Texas Digital Library set up. There are examples around the world with national consortia. We'll hear one of our presentations, I think at the end of Friday, we'll hear from Julia Gilmore of the Canadian National Libraries, and they'll talk about what they do nationally. Kind of the envy of the United States. We often have various players doing many different things in the kind of independent sphere of the United States, but we don't yet have maybe a national sort of uh, repository setup, but something to certainly admire and aspire to. So Australian Digital Theses, DATAD, which I think is an African group. There's just out of the UK, ISTech, LibLink, what used to be known as Thesis Canada, I think is now Scholaris, yeah, and Ethos. So things evolve quickly, but that gives you kind of a little flavor of what is happening out there in the landscape. We'll talk a little bit about HED and institution repository programs and examples. The HKU, Hong Kong University has a very excellent system that many people admire. Virginia Tech has a wonderful ETD repository set up there. West Virginia University, certainly things have changed since the time I've been there, but they do have their very robust repository and fall on the heels of all of the groundwork that we did many years ago. Ohio State University, a very excellent example. UCLA, another wonderful example. And there are many other examples out there that I think are worthy of studying and imitating. The British Library with Ethos, another national system. So a little bit about ETD resources, things that you have to think about in implementing your ETD program. So you have to provide resources for ETD professionals. Certainly, you need to provide copyright resources. Many times the libraries will provide a LibGuide, as they call them, and list their resources and point persons, reference librarians, or whoever people you need to talk to, maybe even your intellectual property office, attorneys, and so forth. Lots of resources to point students to and their faculty to navigate the waters of electronic distribution with your theses and dissertations. Certainly, there's getting a familiarity with the various terms and definitions involved with ETDs and educating the people, your students and your faculty about those, the terminology and systems. There's the ETD and related graduate college resources, ETD Association websites, a lot of good examples out there. There are a variety of ETD surveys that have been done over the years, including on assessment on preservation and so forth. There are institutional repository systems and services, preservation tools, tutorials, and certainly resources for your students. And although I don't have time to go into detail in every link that I provided in this actual PowerPoint presentation, which we will make available through our proceedings, these are linked resources which you can go out online and explore more on your own. So I just thought I'd mention that to you. So in terms of the NDLTD resources, they have an extensive list and point to amazing resources to help you implement your programs to cover every aspect of implementation, preservation, and so forth. So there are implementation guides and mentoring networks, and the ETD listserv, ETDL, very helpful if you have a question, you can pose that out to the entire world, basically. USETDA also has a similar listserv for maybe more US related issues. There are annual conferences and so forth, and many ways to engage yourself, throughout the year with the ETD community. You can learn how to manage your ETD collections. NDLTD has a comprehensive guide to ETD management resources. There is the guidance documents for the lifecycle management of ETDs, and through the Meta Archives people. and they provide guidance for the long-term curation and preservation of their ETDs. So certainly, just like we used to store books and bind them and preserve them in you know dedicated environments, the digital environment is very much the same, but even trickier. And so lots of ways to deal with preservation, but we have to think about those things. So here's just a snapshot from the NDLTD website. This is from some time ago, but the resources are still nonetheless very vital, and we would encourage you to explore those resources, particularly if you're looking to implement a new program on your campus. There's, as I mentioned, the guidance documents for the life cycle management of ETDs. Our friends at the Meta Archives put this extensive documentation together. So I would particularly encourage you to take a look at their resources. And they have a ETD Lifecycle Toolkit, so to speak, which helps cover all the aspects of ETDs from the beginning, the ingest to dissemination to preservation. Um, so just a bit about how we might consider a thought about how we might consider archiving of ETDs and the success of promoting open access, I should say. And So certainly education, getting people used to the notion of open access and so forth, I think is vital. Um, so let's look at briefly some case studies, and particularly in my experience, I think that'll enlighten and engage you to some of the amazing things that we did on the West Virginia University campus some um, 28 years ago. So we involved our Office of Academic Affairs and our Office of Provost. In that particular situation, we had a decentralized graduate school environment, which means all the various colleges and schools handled their own accreditation issues and so forth, but the central deposit and review location was within the libraries because we did not have a formal graduate school, and so that was kind of the logical place. The other alternative and the typical environment, graduate school environment, would be a central graduate program. You have a centralized operation where all ETDs go through and are reviewed extensively, almost to the extent in some schools of being like a journal article review, and they have very careful, format review aspect. So usually in the United States, those are the typical divergences in terms of graduate environments. So we put together an ETD task force to handle the planning, the policy, administration, education, technology issues, and all that, and explore that from various perspectives, whether it be the student or the faculty, the libraries, graduate school, and so forth. We involved our academic computing or Office of Information Technology group. They provided student technical support, laboratories, the workshops, resources, database implementation, and archiving. And certainly we involved our university libraries, as I mentioned. I, at the time, was the one-stop shopping for submitting the documents, for reviewing them, getting them approved, and then putting them into the repository and so forth. So certainly there are costs and benefits to putting ETD programs together that will impact your graduate school, your libraries, and certainly your Office of Information Technology. Um, so in terms of the IT and providing workshops, providing consultants that can help, particularly during crunch time at the end of the semesters, maybe devoting some time to seminars, webinars, some basic hands-on assistance, maybe even some lab hours where it's just devoted to graduate students. Lots of possibilities to provide help for your graduate students. I think most students, pardon me, these days find it fairly easy to produce a PDF file. At the time, it was not so obvious. And now we're looking at additional aspects of, for example, providing accessibility into documents, providing alt tags for your, for your illustrations and graphics and so forth, and getting into new aspects of integrating and making the document even more accessible. But certainly we need to provide extensive help for our students, particularly in the beginning when you're implementing an ETD program. So certainly we have to educate people on notions of copyright, fair use, what the whole notion of open access is. You have to come up with various campus restrictive options while promoting open access as well. Certainly, you probably have an embargo option if someone has a patent pending. All of these accommodations you have to consider with various situations and scenarios that students may have. Certainly, in terms of the graduate school, in my scenario involved myself, it was just one full-time staff person who handled all of the ETDs for, at the time, I think it was roughly 500 students per year. Of course, that was parsed through 3 different semesters, but that gives you an idea of the workload in terms of what we handled at the time. Certainly, our cataloging group was involved with signing appropriate metadata, adapting appropriate standards. Our friend Thomas Dowling will talk a little bit about metadata and appropriate metadata to use with ETDs and how you can make that accessible and shareable to contribute to the Union catalog, for example. Certainly, there's an impact with the handling and binding. We no longer have to bind print theses and dissertations. There's a savings, obviously, on that. There's a trade-off, of course, in terms of less shelf space, but more, let's say, funding going into digital processing, digital preservation, and so forth. But certainly there are some cost savings involved with not handling physical objects and storing them indefinitely in, air-conditioned environments. Certainly, your public services are going to be involved. People are going to do their literature reviews when they begin their research for thesis and dissertations, have to talk to the reference people. It's vital that your reference librarians are aware not only of the parameters of your ETD program, but what would be helpful in finding this ultimate, in being involved in this ultimate goal of creating the electronic document and making that accessible on the internet, hopefully worldwide without restriction. Um, they have to know how to find ETDs and so forth. And now we're finding that people are having to bone up on uh, artificial intelligence applications and so forth, and how to effectively utilize those, how to create, prompt engineering, as they call it, to, properly sort out things that the AI will give you in terms of results. Anyway, lots of new ways to explore, and it's still evolving after all these years. Ed, did you have something to say? Oh, okay. Um, so in terms of the collection maintenance, just in our experience, we started out with a very simple system that was built upon, I think, a Microsoft Access database and some very straightforward applications. And it was simple, and at the time there were not commercial systems available, so we had to kind of figure out where we were going. I think at the time Virginia Tech was using ETDB, which we did not have the infrastructure to handle that, so we went a separate way. But it was a very interesting learning experience. I would not recommend it these days, but as I mentioned, there are many robust commercial and open source systems that are available to accommodate ETD programs. Certainly, you need just in the evolution, we went then to a second generation in-house system. Our overall IT group created that system, more robust and so forth. It was interesting trying to train the IT people about library semantics and so forth and the importance of metadata. And so it was an educational experience for them as well. And by the spring of 2009, we actually migrated to the commercial system, Digitool, which at the time was on its own, I think out of Israel. And now I believe ProQuest offers that as one of their repository resources. Is one of many excellent systems that are out there. And eventually we then launched our WView Scholar, was the public face of our repository system and so forth. And we'll talk a bit about the importance, as I mentioned with Thomas Dowling, why it's important to share your metadata, why it's important to use appropriate metadata and so forth. But I'll let Thomas get into the nitty-gritties of those details in his presentation. We had a deposit process, so there was a submission packet, there was a form involved, a paper form at the time. We had a $15 archiving fee that was tacked on top of any other fees, for example, to process things through ProQuest. We did a multiple redundant archiving scheme. So in addition to digital backups, there were also microfilm facsimiles created and so forth. And because, we were not sure what would happen if all the electronic stuff disappeared, well, we would still have the microfilm equivalents. So anyway, a multiple redundant archiving made us feel very comfortable moving forward. And certainly these days there are many other options, even just built in terms of preservation models. Um, so the students would prepare their final submission, just the kind of scenario what the student goes through. They would get help from our IT office. They would convert their document to PDF and possibly other multimedia files and submit that online. We created an interface to our system for people to log in to submit those documents, and certainly for me to go and review the documents. And then we would make the documents available either as open access, which we would promote campus only at the time. And that was if somebody had, say, a journal article pending or so and could not give initial access. We had a more complicated campus encrypted option, which we no longer use, but that was maybe overkill, but it involved PDF passwords and so forth. I'll just go. And then we had a no access embargo option for someone with the patent pending. And there's some typical scenarios that they could renew that. But typically, I believe patent pending situations are usually resolved within a couple of years after the students graduate. And so they can eventually offer, hopefully open access. Then we evolved to a slightly different scenario. We got rid of the campus encrypted option and we just went with less restrictive options as we went, as people became more familiar. We had, as I mentioned earlier, a few interesting caveats. And for example, the creative writers did not want to submit documents at all. Typically, their expectation was they had to publish a book out of their creative arts thesis. And because the markets are very touchy in terms of monographic publishing, history doctoral students are much in the same situation. And so publishers worry about information being out there, the book being out there on the web before it's published, and then they don't want to publish it. So we certainly have to give special considerations depending on the circumstances and on the publishing traditions of that particular, niche in academia. So certainly things to consider. Sometimes you can't mandate everything, but you need to work with the people. And it's important, I think, to have a dialogue and recognize those issues. So in terms of the review process, we worked along with the committee chairs, and they also worked in tandem to be able to log in and give an approval of the document format. And really very loosey-goosey considerations in terms of review, but there were some basic requirements that we imposed. The document had to have a title page. It had to have basic elements, a title, they list the author, and a few other details about the university, the institution, and so forth, the year of publication, basic requirements. And then in terms of just the basic margins, that the text was not flying off the edge and so forth, but we didn't get down to the nitty-gritty of the content review, which we left up to the committee members. But other models, other schools, graduate school actually has people do hands-on editing of the actual content in working in tandem with the faculty. So different ways to approach this. But anyway, that's how we saw the students through the process. They would submit the document electronically. They would come in person or through the mail, send in their paper packet and pay the fees and so forth and get through the process. As I mentioned here, and then once we process the things, then the library cataloging would be involved and notified. Eventually, the documents would appear, the metadata would appear in our Mountain Links public catalog in the international OCLC holdings and so forth. And so, it's the kind of the process in full circle. And so certainly we provided access through our repository for campus restricted documents. We created an option for interlibrary loan where people could put a request in and receive a paper copy, much like in the old days when you had paper copy sitting on the shelf and they would loan that out. So that, helped, at least we did not distribute electronic documents. And I think that was largely a concern, particularly with people who had publications pending and so forth. And so that resolved a lot of issues and contention from our faculty, from our students, and certainly from prospective publishers. So there was an easy way to deal with that, but continued to provide adequate access to our theses and dissertations. Yeah, and so, like I say, our restricted options have evolved over the years. And in the end, I think it ended up about 60% of our documents. And then eventually about 80% of the documents were all accessible without restriction. We had an exemption process, which, we just had to put in place because it was very new. I don't even know that many schools would grant exemptions anymore, except for maybe those particular fields, creative writing or history, but just a historical note of how we handled that at the time. And certainly, I think the important thing to note is that we should consider ETD posting of ETDs into repositories and distributing that on the internet as kind of self-acknowledged archiving, and it's not publishing like in the traditional sense of publishing, but oftentimes people get things conflated. And so again, education I think is key to getting everybody on board with this notion of distributing your research and actually gaining notoriety from that. And many students have had, very many successes from that. So our friend Stephen Harnad actually documented in terms of open access web distribution versus that book sitting on the shelf. He said the scholarly citations will increase between 2 and 5 times more than having the book sitting on the shelf just by having that document available on the internet. And certainly, depending on the discipline, that could be even many more um, uh, even greater access than the 2 to 5 times factor that Stephen found there. Um, Certainly, there are many open access models out there. The Research Europe is a good model, talking about institutional repositories. The article here is it's a matter of sticks and carrots. Sounds familiar, huh? Um, and certainly, we can talk about the benefits of open access in institutional repositories. People find this is pretty obvious information now, but particularly when you're implementing ETD programs, it's important to remind people the realities of what is true. Open access is a good thing. And I'll just talk briefly to wrap up here some of our success stories at West Virginia University. So as I mentioned, we noticed, I didn't mention this, but we experienced over 145,000% increase of electronic distribution over print documents. So obviously, putting things on the internet really helps to expedite the access to and augment access to these collections. We had at the time around 12 million hits to the various documents after several years of having implemented from a variety of domains around the world. I think probably the largest, obviously, being from the educational sector, but certainly another good 1/4 of the hits from the commercial sector and so forth. Is of the last, I'm trying to think, the first decade, I think they had over 5,000 documents in the collection, so fairly quickly grew the collection. And as I mentioned, close to 500 documents per year in terms of the handling expectations in terms of my involvement with reviewing theses and dissertations. Most popular at the time in the early years was the engineering student who had over 15,000 hits to his document, and that fellow became very rich and famous eventually. Some other examples out of the areas of history, engineering, athletic training, fairly big numbers, people, and that really helps launch people's careers when you think about that kind of impact. One wonderful success story, our historian Shirley Stewart Burns did a dissertation rather on mountaintop removal and the ill health effects of that, and she almost was not allowed to do that dissertation. It was so contentious. But she decided to give it open access, and even in spite of the fact that typically history doctoral students have to publish a book out of that dissertation, and she said, it's not going to stop me, and I really think it's a vital topic. And so she had cumulatively over 120,000 hits to her document in the first decade, I think that was. Eventually, she published her dissertation, rewritten for the general public as a book, and it was published by the West Virginia University Press, the title called Bringing Down the Mountains. And she helped serve as a specialist for the film documentary Coal Country, and that eventually led to public outcry. And eventually, the Obama administration updated the Environmental Protection Agency policy regarding giving permits for mountaintop removal and making safety a large concern. So you can very easily see the impact of making this vital access this information available publicly and how that quickly changed public opinion. So an amazing, like I say, success story that I find very touching in terms of our experiences. And there are many other success stories like that. And as I mentioned, in terms of the access distribution, initially, the collection, more people would restrict access, and then it grew over time as people became more comfortable with the notion of open access. Eventually, 77% of the collection became open access. Certainly, too, we started out with a 5-year maximum restriction option, and then everything became open access. And so as those early works expired out, those got added to the additional open access works and so forth. So fairly quickly, and then eventually became open access. 85% of the collection became open access. So very nice trend to see there. I don't know that we have time to view this now, but there's a very wonderful video embedded here, which at your leisure you can take a look at, which talks about open access and the future of scientific publishing. And there's some very notable scientists and publisher perspectives from this video, and this is pretty well known, but a very excellent resource to show your students and faculty on campus if you want to talk about open access and the impact, the very positive impact that open access can have. Open access button is a concept that you can add that to your repository and promote open access. Various open access success stories, various types of documents, not just PDF files. As time grew, we had more and more students submitting multimedia documents. It could be video clips, audio clips, applications of software, now data sets, all kinds of interesting things. And then you have to consider how you make those accessible, how you preserve them, and so forth. So as your collection grows, it becomes more complicated, but more multifaceted as well. We used to celebrate our multimedia students, and so at WVU, we had a special web page to promote their works and provide examples for other students. The NDLTD, as Dr. Fox mentioned, is their innovative ETD award for students who create interesting multimedia works. And certainly we have an ETD Leadership Award. And we have a segment of our conference at the end. We hope you will join us for our our award ceremony. But very nice ways to honor people who have worked hard to make the ETD vision and open access happen on the campus. So we hope you will participate in this wonderful acknowledgement. So future directions, digital dissertations, non-traditional formats, the sky's the limit. A lot of the discussions with the USETDA seminars and so forth, we talked about very non-traditional formats, and some of the presentations of this conference will explore some of those notions as well. There's another wonderful example from Dr. Amanda Visconti, had a completely digital dissertation, and certainly nothing like the traditional, linear format of a book and a PDF file. So very nice example to take a look at. Some additional services that are out there in terms of putting documents together. If people use LaTeX, there is a whole ecosphere out there that promotes how to use it effectively, authoring services and so forth. There's an article out there, from Authoria, why the PDF is dead and how to write the paper of the future. So how do we re-envision the thesis and dissertation? How do we re-envision sharing that information with the public in a more effective way? So lots of things to explore. Is the repository dead? Probably not, but it's certainly evolving, as I mentioned before. Some schools are utilizing their repositories for very complex things. For example, for collecting the documentation for their faculty. It may not be necessarily public, but they factor all these things into their repository setting. Some works, obviously, theses and dissertations are public. Other parts are part of their administrative evaluation process, and there are many commercial systems out there that will accommodate these more robust systems. At the time we implemented, it was my pipe dream that maybe one day the repository could espouse and hold all of these, the documentation campus-wide, kind of enterprise-wide solutions, which I think is, the ideal way to go in the bigger grand scheme of things. So I think I've taken up enough of your time, but I hope that I've given you, some food for thought and things to explore. And if you're implementing ETD programs and you have additional questions, I would certainly encourage you to contact me or our colleagues, and we'd be happy to help you, and certainly our colleagues with the NDLTD as well, and explore their resources. So let me hop out of screen sharing and see where we are on the agenda because now I am lost temporarily. So bear with me just a second. Uh,
There was a
here.
question about if the slides and so forth will be available, and yes, they will be made
Yes,
available,
thank you. Yes, that is
in,
true.
including the recordings of these sessions.
Thank you. Oh, yes, good to mention. Yes, so we have the proceedings of the actual PowerPoint presentations and so forth, and then we will also have the video presentations. We're recording these sessions, and we will ultimately make them available on the USETDA YouTube channel. And so now, oh, we're actually right on time. My goodness. Okay, I timed that so well.
Can we put the
So,
link in the chat for the video that you didn't have time to show today?
oh, sure. I have to, yeah. When let me get Austin McLean as our next person up here. And so I'll let Austin get ready. But we will hear from Austin talking about ETD Administrator and the wonderful services that ProQuest has to offer. Austin, I can see your smiling face up there. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Austin McLean from ProQuest, and I can see your screen is sharing very decently. So without further ado, please help me to welcome Austin McLean.
Thanks so much, John. And thanks, Ed, for your history. That's always very interesting to hear about. So I'm here at Austin McLean from ProQuest, and we have a tool called the ETD Administrator, which is a workflow management tool for authors and for universities to use to manage having their ETDs flow from the author through usually the graduate school for review and approval, and then to the repository and to ProQuest. So I'll continue on. So as Ed talked about in his intro, the UMI, he mentioned in 1987, was a part of the meeting with electronic theses and dissertations. And UMI and now ProQuest, part of Clarivate, our participation has gone way back to the 1930s. And you can see on the slide that we've had a number of innovations that we're very proud of throughout the years, most recently with partnering with Clarivate and the Web of Science to broaden the visibility of your students' ETDs, and also to have the ProQuest Research Assistant utilize those ETDs to make learning easier, particularly for undergraduates. So if you contribute and your students contribute their ETDs to ProQuest, what are the benefits? Well, the benefits are you're going to join a lot of universities. Over 4,100 already have material in the PQDT or the ProQuest Dissertation and Thesis database, and also in Web of Science. We have 4 million full text documents and a total of 6.3 total documents. We have a large amount of material outside of the US. In this beginning, we were very US focused, but today we have more material coming in from outside the US than in the US. We have 2.8 million non-US theses. Over 60 languages are represented in the database from 75 different countries. So your material would join lots of other universities around the world. And you can see here a bit of the worldwide coverage that we have now, which has been a big change, as I mentioned. Previously, ProQuest was known as just kind of a US and North America centered database in our ProQuest Dissertation and Theses resource, but today it's really a global resource. So your material would join that as well. And also the integration that we have with Web of Science, which is a database that many of your universities subscribe to, we surface those dissertations, the metadata, as part of that Web of Science. So that makes the visibility through PQDT Global as well as Web of Science much broader. And so that ProQuest coming together with Clarivate has really amped up the ability for your researchers' ETDs to be discovered. The citation network is something that is Web of Science is very well known for. And what that means is that we analyze the citations through bibliographic coupling, and we pull together works, they be journal articles, conference papers, monographs, along with your ETDs to see what they have in common, particularly in the reference area. And so we figure that, oh, if the same works are citing similar references, the people who are using the database, either Web of Science or PQDT, would probably want to read those other resources too, or at least know about them. So this bibliographic coupling is really a strong suit of ProQuest and helps your dissertations and theses come together with other content works and content types. We also, through Web of Science, have this research early career research page that they can set up. So a researcher, typically after they do their ETD, what do they need to do? They need to get a job. And so they want to kind of shout from the mountaintops about their ETD and let people know if they're going into the academy or if they're going to the corporate world about their work. And this free researcher profile, which has lots of usage, is something that we think will help those early career researchers become more discovered and learn about not only their ETD, but also other research that they may have done, conference papers, etc. For the universities, a lot of it have asked us over the years, well, what do we really get by participating in the ProQuest program? What is the ROI, the return on investment? Well, we launched this ETD dashboard a few years ago, and we show exactly the usage of your university's ETDs through ProQuest. So you can see the ETD dashboard. If you have any questions about the ETD dashboard, if you're already a participant, we're happy to provide a login to you so you can see those works. We have lots of universities creating reports for provosts of their research exposure through both their institutional repository and through ProQuest. And so now this is additive. So you can see exactly the thousands of usage, which is very typical of the ETDs through ProQuest plus the repository. We also create a dissertation and thesis at profile for your universities. Now, if you already are subscribing to the PQDT Global, then you probably don't need this, but for universities who are not, we always provide free access to your ETD. There's never a charge to access your own material, and that's how you get it through this dissertation and thesis at program. So we're happy to provide you with more information or provide you with a link to the dissertation and thesis at your university. You can just let us know. Kind of so that's the preamble, the kind of the benefits. What do you get by participating with ProQuest? But now let's go into a little bit more details around the ETD administrator. So the ETD administrator, you can see on the screen, has a process where the student uploads their ETD and also provides metadata about their work and metadata about themselves. It is then sent, as I mentioned, usually to the graduate school. Sometimes the library reviews it. Often their review is happening for format review purposes. Typically, the content, kind of the scholarly content of the ETD was previously already reviewed and approved by the advisor and the committee. So the ETD is uploaded to ETD administrator after that process occurs, kind of for a final review by the graduate school. And the graduate school is looking for things like, did the author follow the format guidelines? Did the author include the proper metadata? Did the author upload an exit survey? Or did the author upload the survey of earned doctorates? All of those things can be provided by the author to the university prior to graduation. There's a process within the ETD administrator to have a dialogue with the student and ask them to upload a new version, for example, if they didn't follow the formatting guidelines that they should have. So once that is processed through the graduate school and the graduate school approves the work, then a copy is delivered to ProQuest and to the university's institutional repository. This really speeds things up. Authors don't want to have to upload twice, once to ProQuest and once to the university. So we solve that problem through ETD Administrator. And most universities have also included an author agreement as part of the ETD Administrator. So the university secures the author permission to include that work in the institutional repository as part of that author upload process. So again, this saves time, just like, as I mentioned, uploading other things that may be required before graduation, like the survey of your doctorates or an exit survey or what have you within the process prior to graduation. And then you're done. The moment the person in the graduate school presses the button, the copy is delivered to ProQuest at the exact same time it's delivered to the repository. And the repository also is SWORD compliant, so it can go immediately directly into the repository through the SWORD protocol. We're always working to upgrade the ETD Administrator and add new features based on feedback from our users. Over 800 universities are using ETD Administrator. So you can see that we've customized workflow. Some of the new things that we're doing, we have a committee review feature. So some universities want the committee to review the PDF before it's approved to make sure the author uploaded the right version. So that's an option within the ETD Administrator. We have non-traditional submissions that are more popular now. As John mentioned, multimedia, sound, video, audio, all of that material can be included as part of ETD Administrator. We have single sign-on, which is a robust way for authors to access the ETD Administrator and to allow them to use the credentials from your university, so they don't have to sign up for a new ID and password. I mean, you know, who today wants a new ID and password? That's an onerous burden on a student and not helping them. So the Shibboleth login has been very popular with universities. Universities and authors can purchase bound copies from ProQuest if they so desire. A lot of authors want to have a bound copy on their shelf or provide a copy to their advisor or to their family members. And we have this great ProQuest customer service team that is responsive. So if there's an issue with uploading the work or any part of the process through ETD Administrator, that the customer service team is simply an email or a phone call away. Benefits to the author, and this is important to note, the benefits to the author are many because we securely host the content before it's sent to the university and to ProQuest, but authors retain the copyright. ProQuest is a non-exclusive publisher. We are not taking the copyright from the author. The authors can completely keep that copyright, and they can then use it in creating a journal article or in a monograph or however they would like to use it. We pay authors a royalty based on sales. So when an author's royalty equates to $25, and it could take 1 year or it could take 15 years, we're happy to pay the author that $25, and then it ticks over again and starts afresh after we send that $25 or greater check. So they benefit from the visibility offered through ProQuest. I mentioned the print author copy options, and we also can register the author's work through the Library of Congress. The Copyright Office is a partner of ProQuest, and ProQuest is the largest provider of copyright services through the Library of Congress Copyright Office. So we have thousands of authors who register their copyright every year. It's not required to register your copyright. The benefit of registering a copyright is that if the author is infringed upon, the author gets much more money from the infringer than if it wasn't registered. But there is no requirement to register for a copyright through the Copyright Office. And if the author has an ORCID ID, they can use the ORCID ID as part of ETD Administrator, or they can generate a new ORCID ID. So if you're interested in learning more about the ETD Administrator, we invite you to join our panel, which is tomorrow at 5:40 p.m. Eastern, where we'll talk about in more detail about the new features in ETD Administrator. And we also want to hear from you about, if you're a user of ETD Administrator, about the things you'd like to see in ETD Administrator. And to learn more, you can email us here at academic.relations@clarivate.com, and we'll be happy to get back to you and with any questions that you have. So with that, I'd like to thank you for listening and thank John and Ed for having us talk about ETD Administrator.
Thank you so much, Austin. That was very informative. And so we're going to segue over to, I think Austin has done screen sharing, or
Yes,
if
I'm
not,
trying to stop right now.
that's
There we
okay.
go.
That's
Okay,
okay.
here we
I'm trying
go.
to
Yep,
provide
I
a,
did it.
yay, provide a clever segue here. I'm going to call upon Thomas Dowling to join us, and in a few minutes here. But I need to wrap up this little segment here just to talk briefly about commercial and open source repositories. So let me do a screen share and go to the web page this time for a little demo of resources that we have listed with the USETDA. Okay. Yeah, let's go to here. All right, I believe that is showing. So from the US ETD website, we have resources for ETD professionals. And someone tell me if you're not seeing this demo with a pull down, but I think I have my screen shared appropriately. And so under resources for ETD professionals, we have a variety of resources for various categories. Now, I will caution you, some of our resources are limited to member only, but we have some fairly robust member options. So even if you're just a free associate member, you can access the resources. And then some of our other resources are for paid subscribers and so forth. But eventually we release all of the information to open access, public available. But when we first post information, sometimes it's just available to the members. So having said that caveat, because if you go in and you see you need to log in, and then it will direct you to the membership pages. That's how this drip content works, the new marketing concepts. But it really helps to engage our people with our resources. So for the matter at hand, we're going to look at the institutional repository software systems. And again, this may need some updating. So certainly I'd be happy to entertain if you have some additional resources to list or things that she thinks should be taken down because it is no longer available. But I just wanted to point out to you there are a plethora of commercial repository services and systems out there, as well as open source systems as well. And so depending on your needs, and then further, as Alston mentioned, I'm talking about deposit interfaces, a variety, including ETD Administrator, and some other systems out there to help you ingest and review your documents. They're not repositories outright, but help you with the processing of the ETDs. And there are certainly a plethora of other resources that you can check out at your leisure. The other thing I will point out is in the chat notes. Let me stop sharing here. Oops. Stop. Yes. In the chat notes, I posted a link to the open access scientific publishing advocacy video, which I think you find very thrilling and really useful to show your students and faculty on campus. So I think we're pretty much back on track. That's all I had really to say. And also, I would mention to everyone your comments and questions in the chat. We are collecting those, and we're going to reserve about 20 minutes toward the end of this whole session. I think at 1:10 to 1:30, if not sooner, depending on how these presentations go. We'll entertain all of these questions, so we will not forget. But Renee, help us to remember. We'll help each other to remember to circle back and touch base on these questions. So please keep posting them, and we're happy to see your engagement. So now, without further ado, if Thomas Dowling is around, you can show
I
your
am.
smiling face. There we are, sir. And if you want to screen share or whatever, if you have PowerPoint slides, you go for it. And I'm just going to turn the floor over to Thomas Dowling.
Okay. And is that showing correctly?
Yes, I think, yes.
Okay.
I'm seeing the slide. Yeah.
Okay. Good morning. I'm here to talk a little bit about OETD and a little bit about metadata. I run the site oetd.org. This is a search and discovery service for open access ETDs. It pulls records for ETDs, that is metadata, from over 600 repositories around the world. and it relies on a standard called the Open Archives Initiative Protocol for Metadata Harvesting, or OAI-PMH. And I was kind of stunned to realize recently that OAI-PMH is now a 24-year-old standard. It is very mature, it is very stable, it is very well supported, and it is probably built into your repository platform. It's in most of the common ones, which means your ETD site is probably either already making its metadata available, or doing so simply requires turning that service on, a configuration option of just basically flipping a switch. Let me say, though, that if you have a locally developed repository, or if you have something like, a Fedora backend with a Blacklight front end, it's possible that your developers simply haven't taken the time to turn on OAI support or to implement OAI. And that might just be because you haven't, or no one else has told them that that you kind of think it's important to share your metadata. So I encourage you to make sure that they're aware of that. And as a brief note, if you have the Ex Libris Esploro repository, it looks to me like by default that comes with OAI disabled, so it needs to be turned on. So so there's just that little point. This comes up from time to time, so I want to point out something about OETD. My site only indexes metadata. It does not house any full text. It doesn't grab anything from your site and hold on to it. Its purpose is really to direct searchers to your repository. It wants to take the unique and valuable scholarship that we all help make available and make it sort of more universally findable for researchers. Or to put it another way, we all have special and valuable content on our sites, but very few of us have so much special and valuable content that people from around the world are coming to our sites specifically to search it. So it's my hope that that all open access ETDs will eventually be indexed in OETD. So I invite you to take a look at the site and see if they're already there. If not, send me a note. My email address is dowlintp@wfu.edu. And I'll say this just to sort of wrap up what I'm going to say about the OETD site. I always act on the assumption that I can index your publicly available metadata for publicly available ETDs. So I sort of just go ahead and do that where I'm aware of it. But I never assume that I have any permission to redistribute your metadata. So I'm not passing it on to anyone. And that comes up because every once in a while, a researcher or more often a commercial company will ask me if I can simply provide them with a record of all 7 million records in OETD. I do not do that. So that's real quickly what OETD is and where it gets its metadata. So let's talk just a little bit about our metadata. The librarian in me wants to say that metadata is good. Good, complete, granular metadata, always a good thing. Let me back up one step and say 3 overall things about metadata. Be clear, be consistent, and coordinate with your partners. Because especially when you start sharing metadata with other ETD programs, maybe in a consortium, maybe in a statewide or national database, maybe by including them those records in OETD, it is important to coordinate on what metadata you provide and how, and some things are going to be more obvious than others. If you look at the kinds of metadata I'm collecting here in this record, if it's readable on your screen, I'm really looking for some basics like an author name, a title, and a URL to link to. And it's surprising sometimes how often one or more of those is not in the metadata. I also look for a date. I look for an abstract or a description if it's available. And another thing that isn't always obvious, especially when it's just you publishing your own stuff, a lot of times the metadata does not include a clear indication of who's publishing this. What university is it from? So that's something that's very helpful to have, and even more so as you begin to combine your records with other people's records. I always find it's important to indicate under what terms an ETD is available, and that's going to come out in the rights statement. Now, you may have a rights statement that says something like copyright 2025 Jane Smith, all rights reserved, and that absolutely has a place. But it's also going to be really important to talk about, whether that ETD is accessible or not, whether somebody can get to it. And that there's a real benefit when you're talking with consortial partners, so that when you use terms like restricted or campus only or embargoed, that everybody thinks they mean the same thing. So that's where you start to see some real benefit from just talking and coordinating, and maybe sitting down for a meeting or two to say, how are we going to describe the access levels for our documents? We are talking specifically about ETDs here. So you probably want to be aware that there are some metadata formats that talk specifically about the fields in ETDs. The ETD metadata standard from NDLTD is one of those. There's a URL for that on your screen there. It takes it takes all of the fields from the sort of stock Dublin core set. So author, title, description or abstract, the identifier, the URL, all those that you see there. But then there are specific ETD fields in that format for the name of the degree that you're granting, its level, undergraduate, master's, graduate, the discipline, the field that this is published in, and the grantor, or again, the institution that this actually comes from. Again, in a consortium or a shared environment, there's a real benefit to having some consistency across things like the names you use for degrees and how you indicate levels. When you're trying to combine everything in one shared database, if one school is entering a PhD dissertation as just the letters PhD, and somebody else is doing PH.D, or somebody has some other abbreviation, that makes it just that much harder to co-locate all of them when you're trying to search. Another thing that I find when I'm looking at metadata from multiple repositories, a lot of repositories, it's up to the item metadata to identify that a record even is an ETD. And that's something that sometimes just kind of gets lost in the shuffle. There are other ways to do it by, like putting all of your ETDs into one separately harvestable collection. But generally you want to have a field, generally the document type within the metadata itself that says, hey, this is a thesis, this is a dissertation. For those of you who are, well, I'm sure for a lot of you, but especially if you are trying to share records with other universities in a consortium, you may want to sit down and have some very long, detailed discussions about subject metadata, like assigning subject headings and assigning keywords, and how you're going to do that and who's going to do that. And honestly, if you find a good solution, come back to this meeting next year and present on it, because we all want to know. These are areas that are always going to be a little squirrely and complicated and time consuming. And a lot of times you'll find that you end up asking the author to provide them. And first of all, your author will be an expert in their own field, but will not be an expert in assigning subject headings. And also, by the time they get to this part of the process, they will just be so sick of the entire process that asking them to do just one more thing is it's a big ask. So, subject headings within OETD, I'll take anything I can get, and I don't expect that there will be a lot of consistency. I'm, let's say, guardedly optimistic that in the near future we will have tools that can ingest the text of an ETD and accurately summarize it and maybe generate subject headings, but we will see about that. So that's kind of what I wanted to say about metadata. I mentioned the NDLTD's own format, ETDMS. I am very much aware that I'm very much aware that the UK has a similar format. UK ETD DC. Germany has X-Metadis. There are probably a couple others I'm forgetting. In the end, they all cover kind of comparable information because we're all talking about dissertations and theses. So use whatever format you have available. Provide as much granular metadata as you can. Be consistent. Be clear. One more thing I want to mention. And I don't want to go over my time, and there may be a couple of questions. There is a real day, or a real present day reality about anything that tries to work automatically on the web, like an OAI harvester. Every one of our sites, whether you're aware of it or not, all of our sites are constantly being bombarded by waves of bots trying to crawl. They're trying to crawl and just ingest everything that they can reach and everything they can consume. And a growing number of our sites are putting up defenses to limit access to humans only. Wake Forest does this, for example. The thing is, while an OAI harvester is a friendly bot, it is still a bot. And if you've got one of these human checkers available, it's probably going to screen out harvesters. I'm seeing this on a growing number of sites. So I'll just say this. If you want to be sharing your metadata, and I strongly encourage that, obviously that's what my site is about, there are multiple ways to let a known good bot in, like my metadata harvester, somebody else's harvester, and contact me for ways to do that. So I think that's where I will end. And I'm not sure if there are questions that we want to look at or
Yeah,
not.
Thomas?
Yeah.
So we just have one prime question, then we're going to take a break, and then we'll entertain other questions. But I see, just a question. How can one add your repository or join OATD?
Quickest way is to send me email. Dowling.
Okay, and I see you've posted that. Yeah, I see you posted that in the chat. Great.
Yeah. I do find first, I sometimes get emails saying we would love to add our ETDs, and I go and look, and it's a school that, in fact, I already know about, and I've been including their records for some time. So do go and look and see if your records are already there. But absolutely, if you've got a repository that I am not currently including, I want to include your open access, freely available graduate level ETDs. And if you don't have an OAI PMH option available to you, let's talk regardless.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Thomas. It's been very
Thank you.
informative. And now we all know how to share and how that magic of open access happens. So we're going to take a 20-minute break here from 12:20 to 12:40, which I'll post this in the chat note to remind everyone. So well deserved because this is a long workshop, but we will reconvene at 12:40 p.m. Eastern. And so we'll see you all shortly. And thank you all. Convene. I see Renee has started recording. Excellent. Thank you, Renee. I put a quick chat note out to Ed Fox. Let's see if Dr. Fox is about ready. We're going to talk next about preservation issues, a very vital topic.
Yes.
And Ed, I think I hear you.
Yes.
Coming back. Welcome. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Ed Fox to talk about preservation. And Ed, I think you probably have some slides to share as well. So I'll give the floor to you, Ed.
Good afternoon on the East Coast. Wanted to thank all the people who have joined the session. I should mention Larry Tague is the one who ran the very first NDLTD ETD symposium. So nice to have some of the early people involved in this, as well as newer people. I saw posts from Bill Ingram, who's one of the technology leaders in this field. Extensive research going on. So many other people of the NDLTD board have joined us today, which is wonderful to have all of you. And I hope you'll share some thoughts when we have the discussion later on. So speaking of thoughts and strategies, One of the important topics has to do with preserving ETDs. It's wonderful if we create them and put them up, but then if they disappear, that's not very good. So let's look at some of the places where you can find more information. Many people make use of Wikipedia, which is a wonderful resource. And here's a whole list of different descriptions of issues that relate to digital preservation broadly, and some of them relate specifically to ETDs or apply to ETDs. So all of these slides and so forth will be accessible later, and you'll be able to click on those, but you can go to Wikipedia and start with digital preservation. NDLTD has a separate page on ETD preservation, which is very helpful. Since about 2008, we worked with the MetaArchive Cooperative, which you'll see more about on the next slide. There are many digital preservation systems. For example, DuraSpace was one of the big initiatives. They merged into Lyrasis, and Portico is another one of those things. There's a digital preservation coalition. Whenever you have important topics like this, our standards organizations, such as ISO, tend to create reference models. And one of the reference models that's applicable to this is OAIS, Open Archival Information Systems. So I should point out the word archival. A number of years ago, I was part of a team in Portugal. They had a long tradition of doing archives, but not much of libraries. And if you go around the world, you'll see that there is a different amount of emphasis in some places on archiving and preservation, in other places based on libraries. Sometimes they work together, like Library and Archives Canada. In the US, we have the National Archives, which is different from the Library of Congress, which is actually not really a national library in the sense of other countries. So this whole issue of archiving and preservation has been around historically for a long time, but in the digital world, we have additional dimensions to talk about, and I'll refer to some of those. But this is a very good standard. You can get to this. And of course, I mentioned the Library of Congress. They have a whole directorate that's focused on preservation. So the MetaArchive is one of the key players in this world of ETDs. It was founded in 2004, but unfortunately it was sunset earlier this year. They explored many different data types and genres, all kinds of content types, including ETDs, newspapers, photographic collections, business records, data sets, and so on. The announcement from the LOCKSS group, lots of copies keep stuff safe, which is one of the key principles in this field. If you have copies spread around all over the place, then you're not as subject to a fire or electrical problem or other kinds of issues which might lose content. So there's a bit of support and transformation of the work from MetaArchive that's been taken up by LOCKSS. And there's a list, a news story that relates to that. So MetaArchive worked with us, and we have a page at the NDLTD website about managing ETDs that covers many different topics. John gave a pointer to the guidance document for lifecycle management of ETDs. It's important when we think about ETDs that, just like people, they go through many different stages, and we often refer to this as a life cycle. You start with creation, you have indexing, cataloging, providing access, then people start to use this again. So there's a whole life cycle of what goes on with this. So how do you manage not just the very beginning of a program, but throughout the entire history of these particular works? And ultimately, the purpose of ETDs is to share knowledge and to give acclamation to the creators and improve their reputation and the reputation of their institution. So all of these things are important to think about. Sometimes it's worth at the beginning to create a work in a way that's easy to be preserved, so that later on in the life cycle, it's easier to work with this. This is why we don't put up typically Word documents, because and WordPerfect and other kind of early word processors are a good example. might be easier for the author to put something up in some convenient form for them, but if they don't use standards, then later on in the life cycle, it may cause additional expense. This is also why old works that were created on paper before their institution went to ETDs, it's very expensive for them to be scanned and then put into a collection. So it's good for institutions to get started early and have mandates so that all the works are done electronically, which makes it easier in the life cycle. Educopia was part of this initiative. They created the ETD Plus guidance briefs and ETD Plus toolkit, which are free introductory training resources, all about curation and this digital longevity kind of issue. And there's a blog post here about that. Thomas Dowling mentioned the ETD metadata standard, which was created many years ago. Perhaps it's time to revisit this. We'd love to have ETD experts look at the international work that's been done since then and see if we want to extend this and improve this in different kind of ways. So these are all parts, again, having the metadata present and correct is really important. Bill Ingram and others on the team that he led collected about 500,000 metadata records from around the USA with funding from the IMLS. And there were all kinds of problems. Almost a third of the records that we found had some kind of problems. So it's really important to get the metadata to fill in all the fields, to have them in the correct place, and so on. But it's nice to have a standard that tells us the importance of the many things that we should characterize these works with. But we also want to preserve the actual works themselves, not just the metadata. And there are many issues that have to do with preservation. This is just a short list of some of the topics that people who are interested in preservation and archiving think about. If you're thinking about early works, and we heard from Austin about the early days of ProQuest when they were microfilm and microfiche stored versions of things, which were nice to have and distributed and so forth. But nowadays, when someone has an all digital work and there is no paper copy, there's nothing to create on a microform of any kind, then we have to go digital. And if we go digital, then we have to deal with the digital world, and we have to deal with the problem of format obsolescence, which is one of these kind of topics. We have to deal with the problem that some people create things using software like Flash that is no longer being supported. So we get into emulation techniques, we get into all kinds of computer methods to preserve this. There are institutions that are involved in this kind of work. Sometimes they're national organizations, sometimes they're nonprofits like the Internet Archive. And there have been groups that have tried to create descriptions of what a trusted repository should be and what a trustworthy digital object should be that is self-describing. So all these topics are really important, and most faculty at universities, many people even in libraries, are not even aware of many of these different topics. But it's important that when we create the works and when we produce these repositories that we think long-term. Many people have a very short-term focus in life, but let's think what's going to happen in 5 years, in 10 years, and 100 years. And these are the kinds of issues that we should plan it as we build these global collections. If people are investing in building and supporting these things, we want to make sure that it has a long-term capability. Which is why NDLTD has been recently getting engaged in more discussions about future collaborations. One is with the Internet Archive that, for example, the OETD that we heard from Thomas Dowling about, there's discussion, can they harvest from that and create a collection so the actual works, not just the metadata, are being preserved, and what are the issues with this? It's interesting, some new books are coming out with a stipulation on the copyright that they can't be used for training AI models. Will we have that going on? The Internet Archive collects things as a wonderful service, but there are also archives in other countries, national activities, and so forth. Another discussion that's been proceeding is with OCLC, which runs a few of these kind of systems. And they have, for example, up through 2014, they had an initiative to do a health check on preservation, just like we do health checks on people to see if they're in good shape and safe. Thesis Canada is one of the initiatives we'll hear about at the very end of this conference, with Library and Archives Canada as being a crucial organization that's involved in this. And we hope to have more collaboration and hear more from them. So this is an international issue, an international problem. And I think I've filled much of the time, but I think that's enough for this point. So I pass it on to the next speaker, and John, take over.
Ed, thank you so much. It was very informative. And again, a very vital topic about preserving those ETDs. Once you put them out there, how do you keep them alive? So next we're going to talk about community issues, how to engage not only with USETDA activities, but certainly we welcome anyone from around the world. And we hope that our models of engagement will help you, inspire you, and maybe create, you can create your own regional sort of groups to talk about these issues. So we'll talk about the community engagement group. We'll talk about the ETD formatting users group, and I'll talk a little bit about regional networking and kind of the history in the United States and how that has evolved over time. So without further ado, we're going to start talking about the USETDA Community Engagement Group. So I'd like to turn the floor over to Kristin Terrill. And I see, Kristin, you already have your poster ready to go. So without further ado, please help me to welcome Kristin Terrill.
And Ruth Liu, I believe.
Thank you. And Ruth, welcome too. Thank you so much. I can't forget Ruth.
Yeah, so Ruth is sharing her screen, and she and I co-facilitate our USETDA Community Engagement Group. We have sessions every other month, and they're online. Usually we do an hour to 90-minute sessions to just get the community together, share some things that we've learned, and you know, it varies. We kind of try to vary the conversation topic. So as you can see, what Ruth is sharing here is some of the topics that we've focused on this year. And at the beginning of this year, when Ruth and I took over from Emily Wookner, who set a very high bar for community engagement group moderation, we talked about how we wanted to focus on professional development for our profession as thesis and dissertation administrators. And some of the topics that we've had are savoring the art of ETD, where Dr. Ruth and her partner Sherry were giving a very beautiful and memorable presentation about the history of tea globally and demonstrated a tea ceremony. And so we all got together and we had our tea, and I learned a lot of new facts about tea and the history of it. Another time we talked about pets. That was our summer session, so it was a little bit less professionally oriented, and we didn't have a cultural lesson that we taught on that one. We mostly just connected, and we really connected about our pets. We learned so much about each other and who we are and how we bring this kind of empathy and caring to our work and our personal lives. Our last community engagement group session was all about grant writing as academic professionalization. So we are all like academic professionals, or some people call it alt-ac, alternate academic. And part of that might be grant writing. Ruth and I have both successfully written grants in the past year, and we wanted to share our experience. And then because it's a community engagement group, all of our sessions wrap with a lengthy group conversation. And that's where I learned about in-kind declarations on grant applications, and I will definitely take that knowledge forward. So I hope that you will join the community engagement group. It's very easy to join. You just sign up on our interest form. And then once you do, your name will get added to the list. And whenever we set up the community engagement group meeting in the Outlook calendar, we'll send out an invitation to you so that you can block it off on your calendar and have the Zoom link ready to go. And then we all meet on Zoom and have usually fun. It's usually actually quite a fun, enjoyable conversation, and hopefully get also some professional development out of it. If nothing else, you get professional networking. So it's quite fun. And then I'm going to just mute my mic and let Ruth share as well.
Thank you, Dr. Kristin Terrill, and thank you for all the wonderful experiences of serving as a co-chair in the CEG group. I want to echo all of your sentiments, and it's wonderful to be in this community talking about different topics and also learning from each other. And I love the synergy from the group and want to continue to explore different topics with you all. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Kristin and Ruth. It's been very engaging and enlightening. And I must say, the projects that we've taken on this summer were very inspiring. And sometimes maybe initially we wondered how they were related to ETDs, but this is all about building community. And the prime example I think about is oftentimes the people at the libraries and the people at the graduate school, the other two sides of the house, don't often talk to each other, don't know how to. And so I think some of these exercises in bonding experiences really help us to join together kind of the two folds of our, within our professional groups here, and largely they're library and graduate school people. So kudos to you for creating these wonderfully enriching experiences. And as I mentioned, I really would encourage everyone to participate not only in our activities, but to create your own groups and activities in your own regions as well. So I also posted a link to the community, our community web page. And I'll do a brief demo here. I'm going to stand for Sally Evans. I'm not going to pretend to be Sally, but she's a great colleague. We've known each other for years, and she's such a wonderful entertainer and administrator. So I'm going to do a little website exploration. Let's just share my screen. Yes, here we go. I'm on our community page, and if you hover from the links here, there are various links, not only to the community engagement group, but also to our ETD formatting users group. And we really at USETDA are, I think, all about creating community, and that I think has been one of the really vital aspects that we've done or accomplished, and certainly that was not without the help of all of our participants, around the United States and certainly around the world. But really, as Hillary Clinton used to say, it takes a village, and it's, I think, really important for people to be able to communicate with each other about vital issues on a regular basis. And so we create these, these experiences, these webinars or seminars, whatever you want to call them. And so each group, the community engagement group and the ETD formatting group, they meet every other month, alternating months. And so right now we're going to explore a little bit about the ETD formatting users group. And so really these folks get into the hot topics, the nitty-gritty details, the crazy campus issues, how we're going to implement accessibility, for example, and all the people hate us because we're just imposing more onerous, rules upon them. But really the shared experience is how can we do this, educating the people about the importance, for example, of accessibility and making them really want to engage and do that. And so that's one prime example. One of our veterans here with us today, Larry Tagg from University of Tennessee Health Sciences Group, is very active in that group, and they actually are putting together a ETD formatting resource guide on the LaTeX platform, I believe. And I don't want to get Larry started here because we can talk all day about that, but it's a really amazing project. And so I hope maybe in our discussion, Larry can chime in and send a link to that resource. But always very engaging. Sally is such a card and entertainer, and she's really great at bringing people together and sharing her experiences. And at the George Mason University in Washington, or near Washington, D.C., she has some really amazing stories, some horror stories sometimes, but usually they get resolved, obviously, in amicable ways, but interesting challenges, we'll say, along the way. And so, always, never a dull moment, I'll just say, with the ETD formatting users group, and they're a wild and woolly group. But so we have their schedule. I think the next scheduled meeting is going to be in November. And as I mentioned, from the community page, additional resources that you can consider. Joining the USETDA members list. We also have the US ETD listserv, and NDLTD has their ETDL listserv. Great ways to reach out and pose your questions to the community worldwide or within the United States. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention, ways in which you can engage with us on a regular basis beyond the annual conference. And so let me take a quick look at the schedule here and see where we're supposed to be. This is until 1:05. We're pretty much there. So I'm going to jump in then to the last topic of this segment, which is, oh, yes, about regional associations. Let me go back to the website for the example here. Now, in the United States, yes, toward the bottom, I know we need to fix our website links, but this at least will help you to recognize. We've had some various regional groups form over the years in Ohio and Texas, California, I think at one point, and also Florida. Now, the interesting thing is these regional support groups, we'll call them, would start meeting on a regular basis within their state, within their region, to talk about technical issues, social issues, and so forth. How can they get together to have common standards? Much of the legwork of what the USETD has done on a national level, people also do at the local or regional level. And so I think I have a slideshow. Yeah, give me a second here and I'll bring this up. This is from the former Texas regional group here. If I can find. Yes, here we go. Now, the interesting thing is that all of these groups have really evolved and been more or less absorbed by statewide associations, which have kind of institutionalized or permanentized what these associations, these more of these local associations started out. And so they started with something very informal. Yes, someone. Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe you can put that in the chat. Okay, your audio is breaking up. Renee, can you help me to maybe get that person to mute? So let me just jump in and take a look at the Texas ETDA mission was to promote open access, certainly to provide resources statewide for all the schools, for a common platform, for common resources and so forth. And it was very vital in forming statewide associations, resources within Texas. And so certain obvious benefits in banding together rather than trying to do things on your own. Oh, excuse me. The Texas ETD Association held their annual conferences. They used to have their website and webinars on a regular basis, a listserv and so forth. Again, much of what USETD has done, but this is more at a statewide or regional level. And so in the end, the Texas Digital Library Association morphed into the Texas Digital Libraries, which is hosted at the University of Texas at Austin as part of their library system. But they provide statewide support now with their repository system called Vireo. And actually, we have a very interesting breakout presentation in this conference. I think it maybe happens later today, but you can check in the schedule there, and we'll be really interested to hear latest developments with folks in Vireo. So Similar advancements have happened, as I mentioned, in Ohio, and in Florida. Now, Ohio Link, and I think we have Emily from Ohio Link here with us at the conference. I don't know if she's here online right now, but certainly they've been major players in developing the statewide repository system for all of the Ohio schools in dealing with all the various issues. But the Ohio started as a very informal sort of association, and they met among schools and so forth, and then eventually that became institutionalized into their statewide system. They got a budget for it and so forth, and so that's the ideal sort of evolution that I could imagine, having these informal associations then become permanent parts of the state, and permanent in terms of the resources that are allocated and dedicated to these repositories, to the statewide effort to have all schools be online on a common platform. And, kind of the envy of many schools who have not, advanced to that state. So many things to be said, but an interesting observation, as I mentioned, that all the statewide associations that have evolved in the United States, I mean, eventually morphed into state-supported sort of agencies, and we continue to have their influence and support with our USETDA conferences every year. And so there are a lot of resources on our website, and you can certainly talk to individuals from those various groups who were responsible for founding those associations, and how you might do that in your region within your part of the world. So again, additional success stories and things that we found are very helpful, and our constituents really appreciate having those venues in which to participate. So I think our last segment, and I'm about ready to turn it over. Yes, I think we're on time here, so we can leave adequate time for Q&A, is to talk briefly about the Journal of Electronic Theses and Dissertations. Ed, let me stop sharing here, and then I'll let Ed Fox take over and talk a little bit about the JETD.
So in terms of publishing and resources, there are many different ways to share information. Because we wanted to be sure that it was easy for people to get access to the conference materials, we launched a journal, the Journal of Electronic Theses and Dissertations. This is supported from UAE, and it was launched in 2021. It's hosted by their library and connected to other kind of resources. The managing editor until very recently was Charlie Greenberg, who did a wonderful job getting all these things going. I've been serving as executive editor, and I'm responsible now until we find someone else to join as a managing editor. So I'd like to hear from others who are interested in contributing to this. There are a bunch of associate editors that are listed here. We also are happy to have other people join us as an associate editor to help with reviewing materials. This is your journal. It's open access, so you can go and search and browse and download and read any or all of the works that are there. You can learn more about the global ETD movement and all the related research, development, and best practices. Everyone involved in ETD activities of any kind is encouraged to make a submission. We'd love to publish your work and share your knowledge so that others can be guided by that. If you go to the website, you'll see that it supports browsing and searching. There's an online article submission system. The reviewing is double blind. We ask that people use the APA 7th edition standard for professional papers. And at this point, we've been supporting Word or rich text format contributions that are double spaced. In order to make a submission and do double blind, we need to have a cover letter, which describes the purpose, the contributions, and if there are any competing interests, if this is being submitted to some other place, and what the story is about that, because we don't want things to be published in multiple places. There are many different kinds of topics that are listed here. So we encourage you to think about what you're doing, ETD plus whatever, sort of a general thing. But you heard before about issues with patents. There are, of course, persistent identifiers, how we link with other kind of repositories. Larry put some stuff in about figures and tables and their Figshare and other kinds of groups. I always think that one of the important institutions in the world is the university library, and it's important for preservation to occur there. But this journal is a way to preserve and get things out and to get on people's resumes the fact that they published a journal paper that relates to this topic. So we'd love to see more contributions on any of these kinds of topics and others as well. We support multiple types of submissions. Most of the works are full-length papers. We have a limit of 5,000 words so people can focus on what's going on. But there are also other categories, ETD in action, letters to the editor, review papers, commentaries. All these things are most welcome, so please contribute not just the full papers, but these other kind of descriptions of works that you're doing and interesting things to talk about. If you look at the statistics, these are some of the most popular articles. You can see some of them are technical, some of them are like FAIR principles, some of them have to do with works in particular countries. So please think about what you're doing and how others can learn and benefit from this by you writing a more detailed description. And we certainly encourage anyone who's at this conference, if you're presenting, put a version of that, a longer version, a more detailed version into the journal. If you're attending and have some things you'd like to share, please send us a submission. So thank you for your time, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, Ed. This is another facet of the community that maybe many people were not aware of, but I think is vital, another asset, another aspect of the ETD ecosphere. And so I'm really excited, that you have been successful in launching that venue. But I think we should encourage others to be very active, whether it's submitting, publications to have journal articles published, whether it's about what you're doing, your latest projects on the campus, or something very high-end, a new IR system. There's quite a variety of technical aspects to this publication, and kudos to you all. And if anyone, as Ed mentioned, is interested in stepping up to the plate and would like some experience, in editorial capacity, we are looking for someone to help run that operation. So without further ado, we're going to jump into the final question and discussion segment of this workshop. And I know you guys have been very patient with us, but I scrolled back through our comments here to see what's happening. So we had a bunch of people really excited to be here and introducing themselves in the beginning. We had, I provided a link to the open access scientific publishing YouTube video, and you can find that here. GWSY Cord just noted the word publish predates the Gutenberg printing press. I didn't know that. Okay, from the online OED at 1235 to make public. And so that's interesting. And then the specific definition, transitive to announce in a formal or official manner, to proclaim, to promulgate, etc. So fascinating. The slides will be available in our proceedings after the conference. We're going to do a little bit of cleanup in terms of access and so forth, accessibility rather, but we will make them available. And also we will make the video content from these presentations available on our USETDA YouTube channel. So Julia Smith from ProQuest says, we support the work of an open access IRs. For anyone whose institution doesn't already partner with us, she's available to discuss their free thesis dissemination program at any time during the conference. Feel free to contact her directly, and she left a link there. And I'll just mention to Renee, if I'm skipping over something, I suppose you're kind of watching the background, let me know and you can help guide me here. But there's a link here to automated retrieval. Oh, I'm just trying to read the whole message here. Yeah. Again, part of the ProQuest offerings, they have information retrieval. Mark Dill says hi from ProQuest. They're doing their ETD Administrator Users Group meeting on tomorrow afternoon. And let's see. There was a question about how do people access the ETD dashboard? I'm trying to remember if that was part of Thomas Dowling or Ed Fox's presentation. ETD dashboard. Who
That
knows
was the
about that?
administrator, the ProQuest.
Oh, yes, thank you. Okay. That was corrected from our friends at ProQuest. Okay. Um, some
Bill
more.
Ingram put a post about a publication that's coming up and will be provided. So feel free to contact him if you're looking for copies. Lots of research that Bill has led that very interesting and very relevant. There will be a couple of presentations later today that talk about some of the related research.
Thank you, Ed. I also posted while you were talking about JETD a link to the JETD website, which is I think currently hosted with the UAE group, the libraries there. So if you're wondering about that link, that's where that goes there. Let's
So
see here.
JETD resolves to their link. So it's easier to remember j-etd.org.
Indeed. Okay. Laura Cauty says her graduate school dean wants her to run reports on administrative decisions on each ETD. However, that does not seem to be data choice in the run reports. I guess this is about ETD administrator. Maybe you guys can address that more thoroughly in the ETD administrator users group. Or if you have a quick answer, I'd be happy to hear from.
Yeah, John, this is Julia. I think Mark Dill responded to that, and we are either Mark or I am happy to field questions like that. Folks want to just chat us directly, we'll take care of it so everybody doesn't have to look at the back and forth.
Good, good. Thank you so much. GWS Wycor just had a comment about, SOBEC CM must be one of the repository systems, is open access, not commercial. Thanks. I will tidy up the list. I'm happy to have the feedback there. Every once in a while, we have to go and re-research and tidy things up.
So Larry brought up a number of issues about long-term and journals and figure depositories and DOIs and all these kinds of things. Bill Ingram has done a lot of work as well on reproducibility. So this whole topic of where do you put something and how do you refer to it and can people get to it is a very important thing. Research done by graduate students should be reproducible so that people can replicate it and check it and make other kind of publications that relate to this. I think that it's good for universities to include the entire work, figures, the tables, the data sets, all the other things, because I kind of trust libraries more than many other institutions that may disappear. But it doesn't hurt to have things in multiple places. Figshare is a place for sharing figures. You can put it in your ETD, you can put it in Figshare. You have to be careful about copyrighting other things, but generally those systems are allowing multiple access. Some of the work that Bill has been involved in has had to do with analyzing ETDs to identify the figures and tables and pull them out so we can refer to them directly and search on them. And there's ongoing research with question and answering systems to find those kinds of things. So lots of interesting problems, but my view is put it in your repository plus other places if you want to make it accessible, and make sure that you identify the key ways to get to things in your citations and your reference list and so on.
Great, thank you, Ed. Yeah, lots of ways to share. Absolutely. Speaking of sharing, Savine McCutcheon just mentioned in terms of assigning subject headings, we were talking about that earlier with the OATD and appropriate metadata. They're doing their win-win apprenticeships presentation, breakout presentation this afternoon. So if you'd like to learn more, be sure to attend that session. I think we addressed how to join OATD. Contact Thomas Dowling directly, and his email rather is in this chat. Okay. Ed, what else? Is there something else I have
Well, I think we should open up the floor. If there are other people who would like to make audio questions, we can enable those. Encourage you to put your name in the chat so we know we should enable audio. I think people are muted now just so we don't pick up things that people don't want. But if anyone has any questions or wants to add other contributions, please let us know. Raise your hand. We'll look for that in the video as well.
So interesting to know, we've had over 50 people involved in this workshop this morning from the beginning. I think the numbers varied. It's down to 52 now. It was up to 56, I think, earlier, but very nice showing. About half of our audience has been participating. So I hope this has been engaging.
I had 58.
Hey, there you go, in a record.
Yeah.
Who else? Who has questions here? Comments, concerns? I know we've given you a lot to digest this morning, but
we have a number of board members of USETDA and also of NDLTD. If any of them would like to share or post things, feel free.
hello, Terry.
How about Bill speak a little bit on this paper?
Also, Terry raised her hand, so we should let her go first, and then Bill.
I just wanted to just acknowledge all the attendees. I was keeping an eye, and we did hit like 58, and there were some people who came in later who weren't here earlier. So I just want to remind everyone that yes, we will be sending out all conference proceedings after the conclusion of this conference, and I'm excited for the rest of the day and tomorrow as well. So
thank you.
Bill, do you want to share anything since you were mentioned? I should also put in a plug that both USETDA and NDLTD are member organizations. If you're not a member or your institution's not a member, we have institutional memberships as well as individual memberships. And we'd love to have you. They're very low cost kinds of things, but we support people and your institution, so please contribute. That's how we function. I see a question from Jennifer. So if you're interested in serving as an editor and reviewer, just let me know. We certainly want you to be behaving in a professional, scholarly way and hopefully have some interest in this kind of genre and contributing to this.
So Ed, I think Jennifer Innes put in the chat here, does the Journal of Electronic Theses and Dissertations have specific requirements for participation as an editor / reviewer, etc.?
Right, that's what I was just referring to.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I got distracted.
Encourage her to contact me. But we just want someone who's interested in contributing to this. We love everyone to contribute to the global ETD movement. And I see people here are from other countries as well. I should mention that English is not the only language in the world. Some of the works on the NDLTD site were translated into other languages. We should probably do more of this as we proceed to spread things. Many works are in other languages, and that's another interesting issue to bring up. So thanks for joining from other countries. Muchas gracias.
Well, your Spanish is very good, sir. I just put your email address in the chat here, so if people wanted or needed to contact you, please feel free. Dr. Fox is a wonderful resource. So we have officially another 5 minutes. We're happy to entertain comments, questions, concerns.
John, I'd like to also encourage anybody who didn't just to put in the chat, just introducing themselves like we started at the beginning of the workshop. It was really nice to meet new people.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much for the suggestion.
And speaking of introductions, I should mention that Renee Nestor is the administrative person for NDLTD, and she's recording this conference and helping contribute. Terry Green and John Hagen have been doing a tremendous amount of work, and Renee has been collaborating with them for several weeks and long before that to get this going.
Yes, thank you so much, Renee. We could not do this without you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I see this. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Oh, Rachel Woodbrook had mentioned from University of Michigan that she's here and happy to talk about. She runs their repositories and so forth. I noticed a number of people from University of Michigan, and that's where my family is from. Originally, I'm from Flint, Michigan. So I think it's the first time we've had participation from the U of M folks, and I'm very delighted to have them on board along with everybody else. Danny Davis from Mississippi says hi. Wendy Cartier from University of Central Florida. Melanie Schaefer from University of Idaho. We got people from all over the place.
Tatiana Richardson, Georgia Tech.
Yeah. So if people have not received the delegate list, I did send out 3 major messages. One, a welcome to USETDA, welcome to ETD 2025 rather. Just a general resource email, the Zoom links, of course, and the what was I going to say? Oh, the delegate list. So if you did not receive that, let me know by email. We did a mass email with a GMass application, but sometimes it hit people's spam folders. And so you can check your spam folder for any additional communications. But if you still have not received it, please email me and I'll be happy to forward those communications to you. Because I did receive a handful of emails wondering where their Zoom instructions to access this meeting went. And invariably they were in the spam folders, but just to make sure everybody is on the same page. So with communications, just a quick housekeeping note, and we have another couple minutes, I guess, before we have to really wrap up, that we're going to take a break here for a half hour, and then we will reconvene. Let me see, at lunch break from 1:30 to 2, or at least for us in the East Coast here is our roughly lunchtime, and then we will reconvene with the opening panel session from 2 o'clock Eastern, 2 to 3:30 p.m. We'll hear about the places you'll go with scholarly works from Lily Compton and Kristin Terrill at the University of Iowa. So, do we have any other final parting comments, questions, concerns?
We have a few other people. Ara Silver from Rackman Graduate School at University of Michigan. Ashley Kate, University of Tennessee, Knoxville Libraries. I know I will mangle this. Lise Augusto Magrina from Peru.
Hi, Augusto. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for your participation, and we will see you back on Zoom shortly. And thank you so much for your patience and your engagement, and we'll see you later.